Well, my name is Melvin McGinnis, and I'm the director of the Heinz C Prechter Bipolar Research Program, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all in person. Finally, after we're pushing now into our third year pretty soon for the pandemic, it's just so wonderful to be meeting in person, renewing friendships, and just chatting, in the hallways. It's just so wonderful. So our 16th annual Prechter Lecture, we are featuring Chamique Holdsclaw, former WNBA All-Star basketball player and mental health advocate. We talked earlier about the fact that she's a coach now. She's not coaching basketball, but she's coaching individuals in the schools and talking to them about mental health and about wellness and all these very, very important things. She has a most fascinating documentary about her mental health journey called Mind Game, The Unquiet Journey of Chamique Holdsclaw. I want to particularly thank Donald and Mary Kosh this evening, who made this event possible with a generous donation to make the whole program possible. So thank you very much to Donald and Mary Kosh. I also want to remind people that what we're doing this evening is that we're recording this, and so it's going to be available as a recording. We decided not to make it live or stream it, and this is what a number of conferences are doing, actually, because it's just the complicated nature of streaming something is challenging. So it's much easier to simply record it and make it available to the public after that. It'll be available on the Prechter Bipolar Program website. This evening, we are going to have two sets of Q&A, question and answer cards. And these are on these little 3x5 cards that are being passed around. And there are going to be two types of cards, one specifically for Chamiqua. And what I want you to do is just put a little CH, her initials, on that so that I know that they're specifically for her. And then there'll be a general question and answer that will involve the panel that we have here. But it gives me tremendous pleasure, I'm looking around for there you are, Stephanie, hi, to introduce Stephanie Prechter, who is just an amazing person. She's an accomplished artist and mental health advocate, and just a wonderful person, and has worked with us over the years and continues to work with us and has helped us with so many different programs, most notably a year and a half ago. It's hard to, I can't recall how time has passed, but the energy program that you had was absolutely spectacular. I think that was almost 2 years ago now in that. So I want you to welcome Stephanie Prechter.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McGinnis. A world-renowned athlete, advocate, author, and now a mom. Chamiqua's powerful story is one that speaks to everyone facing adversity. Born and raised in Queens, New York, she first made her mark as a high school basketball star at Christ the King High School. She later accepted a full athletic scholarship to play for the Women's Basketball University of Tennessee Lady Vols and Hall of Fame coach Pat Summitt. She went on to have a stellar collegiate career that included leading Tennessee to 3 straight NCAA championships. After her illustrious college basketball career, which included several All-American honors and countless other awards, Chamiqua would go on to be the #1 pick in the 1999 WNBA draft. She also had the honor of winning an Olympic gold medal with Team USA at the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games. While in the WNBA, Chamiqua played for the Washington Mystics, the Los Angeles Sparks, the Atlanta Dream, and the San Antonio Silver Stars. Aside from her outstanding athletic career, Chamiqua has dedicated her life's work to mental health and wellness activism. She shares her own personal story in her documentary, Mind Game, The Unquiet Journey of Chamique Holdsclaw. She is also an honorary member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and an ambassador with the Jed Foundation. So I don't know if I see her around here. Is she? Okay. Okay. Please join me in welcoming Chamique Holdsclaw to the stage, and thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Hey, Stephanie. Thank you. I told you there's a whole back way. Hello, everyone. Hello. Can everyone hear me? All right, I'm good to go. I'm just really honored to be here today. I've heard about the Prechter lecture over the years and all the phenomenal speakers that have come forth. And when they told me they were going to select me as this year's speaker and I'll be the first individual to share their lived experience, I was just really honestly taken back because through this journey, I've just met some pretty remarkable people. Some are silent about their journey. Some are fighting a battle day to day. So when I stand up here, it's for all my brothers and sisters who just are living with mental illness, mental health concerns. So as I always say, this is for them. So for me, growing up, let's talk about growing up, my whole journey. Ooh, 30 minutes, y'all. I could be here for 2 hours. But my journey was one, growing up in Astoria, New York. And when I think about my family and I think about the structure, I was loved. I was supported. We did a lot of family outings, a lot of smiles. But unfortunately, those good family times always ended with loud music, my parents drinking, arguments. And it was something that, as a young kid, that I just learned to cope with and deal with. We often hear stories, and, having 2 young kids myself, I always hear about children being, resilient. And so for me, I was that resilient kid, and I learned to, function in dysfunction. I learned to make it work for me. But I remember one time my mom did not come home, and it was a Saturday, and my dad had to go to work. My dad was a auto mechanic, so he was supposed to head to work. And we're waiting for my mom to come. Now, I'm in New York City, so we live in a high-rise, and from our window, we can watch the train station that she will come out of. And waiting, she doesn't come. So we go downstairs to go stay with my neighbor and hang out with her for the day. All right, we got to wait for my dad to come home. That's going to be around 5 or 6. So we have a great Saturday day in the community. Next thing you know, Dad comes. I'm upstairs. I'm like, oh, hey, Dad, everything's good. How was your day? He's like, fine. I'm going to cook you something to eat. He's like, what do you want? I was like, pepper steak, because I loved his pepper steak. And he's like, okay, come back in an hour. So I run downstairs to my friend's house. I live on the 7th floor. She lived on the 1st. And I come back, and I'm knocking on the door. And I don't hear anything. I can smell the food cooking, and I hear the music knocking on the door. So then I turned around, and I'm kicking the door, boom, boom, boom. And still no answer, but I hear this sound from around the corner, and that sound that I heard were police officers. And I just remember them opening up the apartment. My dad was passed out, asleep, the food's on the stove, and he was drunk. And I remember those officers saying, these kids can't stay here. This is a dysfunctional environment, and we were ushered off to the 114th precinct in Queens. And I just remember feeling this chill through my body. I felt fear. I was afraid. And next came the social worker, Miss Ioka, and I just remember her saying, does this happen often? And I'm like, no. Do your parents hit you guys? They're asking these questions. And I went my brother, who was grasping me, and my brother is 3 years younger. At this time, I was around 11 years old. And I'm like, no. And at that moment, while they're asking me, I see this familiar face come from around the corner. And that's my grandmother, June, my mom's mom. And I felt like, yes, we were very close. She's here to save us. And next thing I hear is that we can let the kids go with you for the night, but they can no longer live with their parents. They're going to have to talk to the social worker. We'll be out to visit your home to see if it's fit. Now, that's when everything for me started to get kind of wild because of the fact that, I lived in a middle-class area with my mom and dad. My grandmother lived in the housing project. In New York City, to be exact, it was Astoria Housing Project. And this was a time in the 80s, y'all. So New York City was really out of control. It was the crack epidemic. Just a lot of things going on in the community. And my grandmother would tell me all the time, your parents love you. They just have addiction. As an 11-year-old, you don't know. I'm just think my parents supposed to be my superhero. So I'm dealing with this transition now, moving with my grandmother. I don't go to school with these kids in the community. I feel like really out of touch with it. And then next thing I know, I am having these these temper tantrums. That's what I'm gonna call it. I had the temper tantrum. So, my mom had to go into a treatment program, and while she was in a treatment program, she would get to come out and come visit us. And so, it would be times where she said she was coming, she wouldn't come, and I would just like tear up my room and throw things around. My grandmother would ask me, Chamiqua, what color do you want to paint your room? Black. Chamiqua, what color do you want? I'm picking out dark colored clothes, and because that's like how I felt inside. Like I felt like my parents let me down. And my grandmother, she was a little, I would say, ahead of the curve. My grandmother said, you know what? We got to get you some help. And so my grandmother took me to meet a therapist. And it was the first time, that I really sat down with somebody to talk about these things. My household wasn't one in which we talked a lot about like our feelings or emotions, but here I was. And I just remember my grandmother always saying things like, what happens in this household stays in this household. So now you want me to talk to this guy who's pulled out a Nerf basketball hoop because he heard that I like basketball, which you probably told him, and to disclose things about how I feel about my mom and dad. I didn't feel comfortable. I just was like, oh, okay. So I learned early on just, say the right things to kind of get pushed along. And then next thing that I experienced was my grandma was like, all right, this hate, this is very heavy, right? This disdain I have for my mother. And, I had my mom and dad, but I took out a lot of what I was feeling and disappointment on my mom. And she goes, you have to realize, what it's like to live with a family member that struggles with addiction issues. And so Alateen taught me that. I walked away from that experience having an understanding that my parents are human, that they have to work through their things. And that was a gift because it released a little bit of the frustration. But at the same time, here I am living with my grandmother, and my grandmother was heavily, heavily involved in church, everyone. Every Sunday. I had to go to church. The only reason she let me play basketball is because it was outside of her window, the court. And she was about structure and discipline and community. You're not going to just be hanging out on the corner, like doing something that's not constructive. So there I learned to have like a servant mentality. My grandmother was the head of the Sunday school. And yes, I used to get in trouble about chewing gum all the time. My grandmother was also the head of feeding the homeless. And so, she would always make sure I postured up and, I made sure I was talk to the people a certain type of way. She was like, all people need dignity, people need support. So me and my friends would get together for that. But it was something else she told me in the back of my head that kind of just followed me through my sporting career is, Chamiqua, take out all that anger and frustration that you feel about your family out on the basketball court. And everyone, I really did that. I did that. I was the only girl. You see all these young women nowadays out there playing, a part of all these teams. Back when I was coming out, the whole girl power movement hadn't hit yet. So I was the girl out there with a bunch of guys, and I'm in a new neighborhood. I'm getting teased. I'm getting bullied. Everyone, I was probably 12 years old, 5'9", with the same size shoe I have now, 14. So, I was just a slim kid, a gang lead, just out there having fun. So I had to deal with that also. So finally, after being bullied and stuff, my grandmother decided, no, you're going to our church school. And so then I was, again, ushered out of the community to go to our church school. And so I just remember, she said, take it out on the basketball court. So now, you know what? I want to play basketball. I had never played with girls until I went to this school. I always played with the boys. I grew up with Meta World Peace, Ron Artest, the Lakers star. I grew up with Lamar Odom. They're like 2 years younger than me, but they were big guys, and I'm out there on the court like playing against them. So I think really I'm one of the boys. And next thing you know, I'm at Queens Lutheran School, and they're like, do you want to sign up for this team? And everyone, I go play, And I'm like, wow, man, the girls, they're not as good as I am, you know? And I'm just like running around them. But then I learned, wow, this is another community. These are my sisters. And let me tell you guys, when you deal with that disappointment of a parent, what I felt inside, right? Again, it's my perspective. I always tell my brother, because sometimes we go back and forth with things, and I said, it's how I felt. I felt alone. And for me, when it came to basketball, that's the one thing that I had that was my thing that I like to do. It gave me confidence. It made me want to stand a little bit taller. And so I didn't want to let anyone, you know, mess that up. And I put a lot of energy into it. Now, the academic piece, that was easy because my grandmother did not play. If it wasn't, you know, get the schoolwork done, you're not going to play sports. And next thing you know, I'm really rising up the ranks. And so I decided to go to Christ the King High School, which also was a big argument from me and my grandmother to agree on, because my grandmother believed in like a Lutheran education. That's why I was in Lutheran school. When I was with my parents, I went to another Lutheran school. Now I'm saying, hey, I want to go to this Catholic school. Why don't you want to go to the Lutheran high school? But she let me go, and from then on, I really started seeing myself blossom and grow. I really started to understand that my parents are going to get the help they need. But it's hard. It's hard when your mom's about to get out of rehab. And she went to Smothers in New York City. And Smithers became famous because our baseball star was there, Dwight Gooden. And I think Darryl Strawberry went there also. So it was a place that you heard in the news a lot. So my mom's there getting rehab, and I met her there. I met my mother there the day she got out of rehab, and we're walking down the street. And I hear her tell another lady that she left with, man, I can't wait to have a drink. 3 days later, my mom was back drinking. So I'm the older sibling. I'm dealing with this. You know, my brother didn't know. My mom wanted us back in her home. And I'm like, I'm not going back, because now I'm into sports. Things are going great. I'm starting to see women on television. I can get a scholarship. I see all these famous coaches, Bobby Crimmins, Dean Smith, come to my neighborhood to recruit the male players. I'm like, man, I'm going to college, and I'm going to go and play sports at one of these big schools. So no, I'm not going back with her. And I remember that being there, then my mom really started like cycling, and next thing you know, I'm calling my grandmother. It's like, can you come get us? And for me, I just tried to like always be the strong person. I didn't want my brother sad. I would hug him. I would tell him it was going to be okay. But for me, being, I would say, a good athlete, right? I go to Christ the King. I don't play my freshman year, but the coach puts me on varsity because he's like, you're going to be special. You just have to be patient and watch the older players. Second year, I grew from 5'9", right? I was 5'9" to 6'1". I finally grew into my feet, and I'm tall and I'm confident now. We have the #1 team in the country. And can you imagine what it feels like when you're out on the court, a big game, and you look, and it's like, you say it's hundreds of people, but you know how when you can hear your parent or a good friend, you hear their voice and it locks you in. And here's my mother drunk at my game. So she's drunk, and I walk off the court. I was like, I'm not playing if she's here. Then my coach talks to someone. They get her out of there. And I was just like, all these things, right, that are going on in my personal life. So imagine this. Sophomore year comes. I'm the #1 player in the nation. Not the state, not the region, like the nation. I could go to any school that I want because I have good grades, my SAT scores, I'm getting highly recruited. So all of this excitement, but nobody ever talked about the trauma that I was experiencing. The coaches knew, they witnessed my mom. How did I learn how to drive? If we call I'm very close to my high school coach. If we call him right now, he was like, oh, you learn how to drive, because my father would come, pick me up drunk for practice. Like, we would finish practice 8 o'clock, I'm knocking on the car because he's passed out. And I don't have a license. And so here I am now, hopping in the car with him and taking the back way in Queens, New York, by the cemetery, so we don't have to get on any major roads, so I could get home to my grandmother's house safely. That's no way for a kid to live, but for so long, no one ever asked me, how do you feel? Do you want to, like, talk to somebody? It wasn't until, like, I went to college, and I decided to go to the University of Tennessee. The reason I went there is because me and my grandmother talked. I needed to have that structure. I needed that discipline. I couldn't go someplace where, you know, I was too free, because it just wouldn't be the right fit for me. And I decided to go to Knoxville. And next thing you know, when you're a young athlete and you have like all these offers, and it's funny because I talk to kids about this today, and they're like, I like the colors. Everybody's talking about the colors of the school. Oh, they got my major. Woo hoo hoo. You know, my grandmother, her one of the things she hold on, she'll tell you all her kids went to college. Even my mom, all her kids went to college and got their degrees. And so she says, you're going to do the same. But here I'm now, I'm going to Tennessee, right? And I know they get mad at me too, because I always say, hey, I went to Tennessee if it was no Pat Summitt. You know, she was the real deal, and she was going to make me a better human being. So I go to Knoxville. Oh, y'all, I didn't think about the cultural shift. like, I'm from New York City, and, you know, here I am now coming over. I'm in an airplane. I'm like, whoa, the cows, the horses, all this land. You know, I land down on campus. People talk slow. I talk fast, you know. There's not many people that look like me, so I'm trying to get acclimated. And I know a lot of kids, especially like a lot of athletes of color, this is something that they experience. And to this day, I go to athletic department, they're like, oh, the bigger schools, oh, yeah, it's just no one for me to talk to and figure it out. But for me, I had a coach that welcomed that conversation. So I'm looking at her, I was like, man, this is different. I said, where's the Asian people? Where the Hispanic people? Like, one lady said, over in the International Student Building. So me being a New Yorker, so they all in one building? I'm like, I'm serious. Like, I'm confused. And it was a track athlete who actually ended up being my roommate. She's from New York. And she said, obviously, Chamiqua, you did not look. The University of Tennessee is 98% Caucasian, 2% other. The 2% other make up the engineers from Memphis, and mainly the student athletes and a small percentage of international students. So again, I had to like shift, and I'm trying, y'all. I'm really trying. I'm social, but it just didn't feel right. You know, I couldn't hop on the train and go explore because now you needed a car to get around everywhere. So I remember calling home. I'm like, I'm transferring to UConn. I can't do this. I'm going to Connecticut. And Coach Summitt had already called my grandmother, so she was not trying to hear that. But what Coach Summitt did say to me, and she goes, just be patient, just relax. She goes, trust me, because what I'm going to teach you is sisterhood. I'm going to teach you what family is about. Family's not just about blood. It's for the people that show up and show out for you. And she was right, y'all. She was right, because once the season started, things started flowing. I had a lot in common because we're all searching for our tribe, our community, people we connect with. And so for me, once I met these other women that were just like me, they wanted to play for Pat Summitt, they wanted to experience greatness. We were all in this common bond to work together. So I remember going to my teammate, she's now the Kelly Jolly, she's Harper, she's now the head coach at Tennessee. I remember going to her house and riding a horse. I was like, oh my God, this is like, oh, what's gonna happen? You know, and I remember her saying, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to New York City, or am I gonna get killed? Like, seriously. So we were able to like, I got to see how other people live, and other people wanted to see how I live, and we had those discussions. And so that right there builds confidence in a young person. So we won a national championship first year, right? Oh my God. You talk about on campus, the biggest names on campus are Chamique Holdsclaw and some guy named Peyton Manning. Y'all might know who that is. With Peyton. And so it was like a great experience to see a college town come together, the love and support. So it's like you could do no wrong. Everything was gravy. Second year, we went again. But the second year, it was a little bit of change because the fans get spoiled, right? We won the first year. It was great. Now they get spoiled. We're losing. We lost 10 games that second year. The season was going so bad that HBO contacted Coach Summitt and was like, hey, we want to follow this team around. And they actually did a documentary. You guys can go see it. It's called Cinderella Season, because they didn't think we were going to come back and win, and we came back and won. And the thing about it, we win number 2. Now it's so much hype. I was the first time that a female was ESPN Player of the Week, myself. We have Annie Leibovitz, famous photographer, coming to shoot us. I think I still have a picture of me in the Smithsonian that she took. It's like a famous basketball picture. All of these amazing things. And guess what? Chamique Holdsclaw couldn't get out of bed. I'm in my dorm room, like, what's going on? I'm like, something's not right. I'm telling my friend Antonio who run track, I just don't know I don't know who to talk to. I just don't want to be here anymore. And he's looking like, what? Like, you just won? Like, the people love you. Like, what's going on? He's like, Chamiqua, you have to talk to someone. I wasn't going to class, and I just felt really out of it. And so finally, I'm like, okay, I got to have this conversation with Coach Summit. This is before cell phones, everybody, so you got to go to the dorm and dial, you know. And, hey, Coach, can you meet me? And she's at the, can I meet with you? Come to the office. No way, because I know what I'm about to lay on her is pretty heavy, and I'm scared that someone on the team is going to hear and one of the other coaches. So she met me outside on a bench, and we're talking. And I'm like, Coach, I said, I don't know what it is. I'm just not happy. I have no energy. I want to sleep all the time. I just feel like I got this little crafty little creature on my shoulder. It's something in my head. And she was like, Chamiqua, you got to find out what makes you happy. And when I think about that, even to this day, you know, I was like 20 years old, and what makes me happy is it hanging out with my teammates, is playing video games, like campus parties. Like, I'm really trying to process all this and comb through my thoughts. And the next thing you know, I'm just like sitting there like, I don't know. And she's like, okay, you need to talk to somebody. So she says, all right, we have a therapist on staff, Nina. It's, again, sports performance, but she was the therapist. And I was like, I'm not talking to her. She's always around the team. Because stigma was real. I'm thinking, okay, I'm the captain, I'm the leader of this team. Everybody's gonna think that I'm weak and I'm soft if I'm talking about these things about like my mental health. So next thing she said, I could go off campus. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do that. She's like, you gotta go. And so let me tell you one here, I started going to therapy. The life started coming back. I started feeling better. I started doing better in class, socially. I wasn't as awkward as I was trying, because it's like my teammates know that I'm the life of the party, I'm a fun person, but I have these moods where I just don't want to be around anybody, and I just kind of like do my own thing, but it was coming back, and everything was looking great for me until like my 6th or 7th visit to that therapist. And the reason why things started changing for me is because the therapist said to me, hey, you see the window seat, and it was dolls, and you see those dolls over there? Everyone has a childlike individual in us. And I'm looking at her like, oh, we trying to go here, so let's talk about your mom and dad. And I shut down, and I never went back. And for me, I learned to say, oh, I'm okay, therapy's been great, right? I learned to just say what everybody wanted me to say, and I operated on what I call my 20 and 10 mentality. That's like, oh, as long as I'm getting 20 points, 10 rebounds, people aren't gonna ask me questions. Like, I just gotta perform on the court. Like, I can do whatever, you know, I could sleep if I have to, whatever. I just gotta make sure when I'm around a team or whatever. So I started masking how I was feeling for a long, long time. And the thing about that, for me, it just wasn't sustainable as I transitioned to different points. There were so many highs, right? So when I was a young kid, when I first went to therapy, I heard a term, which, you know, you're young, you're just like, all right, clinical depression, right? Then now I'm a college student, athlete, and I'm hearing you have anxiety and maybe some depression. Okay, I'm like, okay, all right, do you want to try medication? I don't know. All right, well, if you think we need it, I'm going to be monitoring you. We'll go for that. Oh, okay. No, I'm all right. You learn to just say things. Performance is good, and you move along. But as I found myself, you know, next thing you know, like we won again, y'all. Three national championships in a row. So I walked away from college winning 3 out of 4 times, creating history as the first team in the NCAA to win 3 years in a row. But now I'm on to something bigger. Now it's like, oh, Chamique Holdsclaw, this is like, she's going to the WNBA. WNBA is fairly new. Now I'm looking at leaving Tennessee as one of the most endorsed female athletes. So now I'm flying on like private planes to go to Nike, and I walk on the campus, y'all, and everybody has a shirt. I don't even see this. That's how fast life was going. Where it says, welcome, Chamique Holdsclaw. And I'm like, oh my God, that's my name. Like, you know, like, wow. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, who am I going to sign with? Reebok, Nike. I signed with Nike. Next day, before I even step on the court, I'm meeting with Nickelodeon. They want to give me my own show. Then it's the Gatorade. So life is happening so fast. I found myself the #1 pick, going to Washington, D.C., have the agent helping me buy a house. And guess what, y'all? This is #1 pick goes to the worst team. The worst team. So now I'm there. I have things that I've never had before, but those things don't make me happy. And so here I am now, figuring it out as a rookie. I'm playing well on the court. The team did way better than the previous year, so that's a good sign. But something started happening to me. I just always would like, it was just something in my head, just telling me like I'm not worthy. The negative self-talk all the time. I'm not worthy. And then we had the year 2000 came. It's the Olympics. I remember going to Sydney. It was an amazing experience. You're used to being the best in the country, but now it's like the best in the world. We got the gold medal, and something changed. Something changed. I remember that point. I came back, and I'm like, okay, like, what is it? I'm working hard, y'all, busting it. My performance is elevating or whatever, but I'm feeling this emptiness. I find myself crying a lot. I find myself, struggling with like suicidal thoughts, and I just try to like deal with it myself. And it was interesting because Stephanie, when we first talked. Let me take it back a second. Me and Stephanie on a call a few weeks ago, and we're just catching up, just talking, sharing, and I could hear her sketching, right? So I'm like, Stephanie, what are you doing? She's like, I'm sketching. So how did you know? I said, because when I was younger, whenever I'm on a phone, I used to just like write, just start drawing, and I knew that sound. It was very, very familiar. So here I am now. It was like things from my childhood. This little things, like I just remember that, are just popping into my head, and I'm feeling sad. I'm like, here I am. Where's my mom and dad? Like, why are they not here with me? Whatever. And it starts really spiraling. So I hear a teammate say something one time. She said, oh, after the games, it's hard when you're high. You're at a high level to come down. She's like, I just have a glass of wine. And so what did I start? I started saying, I was never a big drinker. I'm like, okay, I can mask these feelings, and I could have a drink, and it worked. I'm like, one drink, oh, this is cool, it helps you relax. Then one drink, a couple months later, it turns two drinks, a couple months later, three. Then I'm drinking a whole bottle, and I'm masking those thoughts and those feelings, and that's not a good place to be. And then on top of that, the years come, I'm more popular now. I got people around me because I don't want to deal with Chamiqua. I don't want to talk about the things that I'm feeling. So finally, it's now 2002, and I just remember telling my cousin, I said, man, like, we got to talk. It's my closest cousin. I said, something's not right, and I just don't know how to go about it. Man, like, mentally, I think I need some help. He's like, girl, what you think? You need help with what? Like, you're successful. This is what you wanted when you were a kid. And then I just sucked it up. But then I got hit with the whammy. My grandmother dies. Oh, boy. That took me every which way. And I always tell people, I buried my grandmother, and I buried my emotions. I was numb. And that numbness turned into probably one of the best seasons of my career. I led the WNBA in points and rebounding, and it was like an out-of-body experience. I remember my teammate Muriel, who's like one of my closest friends. She's like, "You're like Sybil, like Meek. You got you okay? You got like 50 different personalities. I just never know how to promote you." And in my head, I had those personalities because I thought people knew my secrets. I thought they knew that I was struggling, that I couldn't sleep, that I was just really, bottled up. I thought they knew this, so I was just in my mind running from them. And so a year later, right, my grandfather passed away. Now, I'm not going to sit here. I'm an honest person. I didn't have an emotional connection with my grandfather. When I found out, I was sad. We weren't he wasn't the nicest man, and he tried to make it up with me in the way he treated my brother and I, but we were like our grandmother's kids. So I didn't, they called me, they said he passed away. I was headed out with my teammates, but from what my therapist and stuff was telling me, it was like, it put me in this place of sadness. And let me tell you, I'm headed out, and I called my teammate. I was like, I'm gonna meet y'all. Do you guys know I sat there, and I just remember crying, and I just wanted to be with my grandmother. And that's when I lost track of like 3 days, and I guess I was all over ESPN because it's during the season. I was missing in action. Coach Summit flew to town. Everybody was like looking for me, but I was at the house, with the blinds drawn. I wanted to take my life. I remember eating the Fruity Pebbles, and Coach Summit said she came and she knocked, and she knew that I was inside. but I just didn't open the door. And it took Dr. Greenfield, who's a good friend of mine. She had a key, so she comes and she's like, oh my God, everybody's looking for you. Come on, we got to get you some help. So being a high-level athlete, what's the thing people try to do? And this is like, not just an athlete. When I talk to kids, I use the term coached. But when you're good at something, whether it's art, music, athletics, your academics, you know, people massage the shoulders a little bit more. They want to make sure that you stay on course, that you create your greatness. But for me, I felt like in a lot of ways that like handicapped me, and to getting the help that I truly need, it slowed down like the progress in my life. And so, you know, I learned how to bob and weave, y'all. I could work through this, you know. And when she took me in there, and I remember meeting with my agent, a team and stuff, and everybody's like, you know, we got to get you some help. So now I'm in this place, and I remember being very upset because I was not in my right mind. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That I'm suicidal? And they're like, you're going to have to put you on medication, like lithium. And I'm like upset. And then like my mom was there. And she tells me to this day she did not recognize me, and I was just upset because I said, how, you just met me, how are you going to say I'm suicidal? And I remember feeling very upset. But anyway, like I stabilized, right? So the thing is, everybody's like, okay, you're all right, you could get back there on the court. Coach Semin, who's like one of my greatest mentors, she gives me a book by this phenomenal woman. I read it in one day, Kay Jamison, John Hopkins, and you know, she's a big-time psychiatrist, and she lived with bipolar disorder. So I read it, and I was like, if she could do it, so can I. Y'all, I go out on the basketball court against your team, the Detroit Shock back in the day, Bill Lambier, and I'm playing on, like, I'm on lithium, y'all. I go score, and I run back, and I'm just looking at Bill, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I go to the locker room. I never returned to play for the Mystics again. Everybody was just really worried and concerned. So what did I do? I had the resources. I left. I went to Spain because I just needed time away from everybody. Everybody was worried. Everybody wanted to fix me. So now I'm in Spain, and I'm just hanging out in Barcelona. The team finds out I'm there, so I start playing over internationally, which a lot of us do, but not the way it happened for me. Normally, you're home, and they want to sign a contract. Not you're just hanging out in Barcelona. So I started playing. Then Rachel Nichols from ESPN, you know, she wants to come interview me, because the thing is, when you don't tell people what's going on, and I really didn't talk a lot about it, you will see there was articles written where I had Lou Gehrig's disease, I was pregnant. They came to every assumption, but no one talked about mental health, you know. No one talked about the stress and the pressure and all of that. It was just some wild guesses. And, you know, I sat down with her and I was honest. And I told her like how I was feeling. I wasn't afraid anymore. I said, you know what, people are probably gonna judge me. I don't care. And, you know, she went back. It was a big story in the news. And when I came back, y'all gotta remember, when I decided to come back, it was not to DC because I was young. And think about this. I'm in a place where people like really love me and want to support me. I am also in what is considered the most powerful place in our country. So if I would have talked about the things I talk about now and needing help, the resources would have been available, but I was young. And when you're young, you kind of run. And I'm thinking, oh, now the grass is going to be green on the other side. I can go to LA, Los Angeles. I could play with Lisa Leslie, who's an amazing player. It's going to be great. So guess what? Now I live 2 blocks of Venice Beach. I go there. They know what's going on, right? So they get me to talk to a psychiatrist off the bat. I got to go to my psychiatrist twice a week, 9 o'clock in the morning, practice at 10. I show up a lot late to practice. My teammates are like, why is she always late? But we don't discuss it. They just go with it. Life is good. I feel really great. The following year, after the season's over, I'm in great shape. We do well. I go back to Spain to go play, right? And guess what, y'all? I stopped taking my medication. All bad. All bad. I come back, and again, that joy, right? That excitement of me playing for the Sparks turned into driving to practice. I want to crash my vehicle into a tree. If I jump off a building, would anybody care? I hated what I was doing. I hated the people that I was around. I was really irritable, and that's how I went out. And I returned the next year, and I never forget, I got the call. It's 2006. And I was just going through the motions, and I shouldn't have been playing at all. And again, I remember got the call, my stepdad having cancer, and my mom was really having a tough time. My dad, which I found out in college, my dad, who told us one time he was going to chop us up and put us on an incinerator, I used to see my dad hallucinate. I found out my dad, because he was found hitchhiking on the side of the road, that my dad lives with schizophrenic disorder, right? So now, like, all of this stuff is just kind of like hitting me from every angle. And my dad just had another episode. And so my parents live in North Carolina, South Carolina, about an hour from each other. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go. Let's not forget, I was named the All-Star, so I'm supposed to be at the All-Star game. So I begged the league to let me go focus on my family. I go make sure my dad's okay, because I don't want anything to happen to him. I had to sign some paper so he could get his shot, because he was not taking his medication. So now they want for him to get a shot each month or whatever. So we had to move towards that. My mom, I had to help her, understand what's going on with my stepdad. So I get back to LA, y'all. You talk about my brain medication. My friends were at the house with the Jack Daniels. I don't want to be here no more. So I take all the pills, drank the shot, and I'm just out of it. And you know what? My call for help was the young lady that watched my dog. So she came over because she said that she could hear something in my voice. And she got me to the urgent care down the street. And next, the guy in the urgent care started freaking out. And I'm getting like tired, y'all. The guy starts freaking out. He's like, oh my God, you're gonna have to pump your stomach. Oh no, we gotta call an ambulance. I'm in the back of the ambulance. I'm headed to Centennial Hospital. And I experienced, was one of the worst nights of my life, because I overdosed on brain medication. So I had severe hallucinations, and it was the cowboy with the lasso chasing me. And the cowboy and the lasso, and I'm screaming, no, he's gonna get me. And I thought I was gonna die. And what I learned out from some kids who were forest rangers or whatever, I was doing a program in Montana. I have some family. My family's Native Americans. I have some family out there. And I was doing a program, and the kids look at me, and they said, because that's love. The cowboy was coming to save you, because I guess they were telling me when they rally up their animals or whatever, and again, I know nothing about this, they rallied them up, it's out of love to bring them together. So one of the kids is telling me, okay, that's what that was, but I thought I was gonna die. And I remember just vomiting. They didn't want to pump my stomach, so they're making me drink fluid or whatever. And I wake up, all white, y'all, all white room. And I'm in the VIP suite at Centinela Hospital. My psychiatrist is there, and the doctor comes in, and he goes, I don't know much about basketball, but I know who you are, and you can't let things get this bad. It could have been bad for you. You could have had seizures or whatever, but you're going to walk away from this healthy. You got to get help. And I was like, okay. And I sat there. I felt bad, felt guilty, because I felt like I lost hope. I felt like I had support. I had people that loved me, and I said I wanted to make a difference. And I said, okay, God, I remember make a pledge. I said, if you get me through this, I'm not going to be embarrassed about this. I'm going to talk about this. And I did just that. So that's 2006, right? So I've been talking about it. I remember they would ask me on the team, community stuff, would I want to do something? And, that's something everybody in the locker room is kind of turning away from, right? And I'm like, oh, I'll do it, because I tried to, was trying to make it right with my God. And next thing you know, the colors starting to come back. But again, sometimes I don't know, I don't really have a super addictive personality aside from sports and fitness, right? So I want to get the new latest thing. I got to get a Peloton. I got to get this. I got to get that, because I think that brings me joy. But I found myself wanting to talk to so many people about what was going on, because it took the attention off of myself. So now I'm going another way. And then I had an incident with one of my friends, and she's like, listen, everybody else is going to just be around you. I'm telling you, you have to really focus on getting healthier. And I felt better. I stopped playing basketball in the US. I took a year off, first of all. Then I stopped playing basketball in the US. I started doing my therapy and making sure I was consistent, like my friend was challenging me to be. But then I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to go back overseas. Like I said, I played 2 more years in Spain and I think, well, no, 2 more years in Poland. And then I came back to the States. Where I was living in Atlanta, there was a team, right? So now I'm like, you know, I don't even care really about basketball. You know, I'm going to be here to like help these young girls, you know, deal with stuff. And as soon as I started, like, since I'm public now talking about mental health, guess what happened, y'all? As soon as I get off the bus, it's like, hey, Meek, you want to get something to eat? They're opening up to me about their struggles. And I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea. So I would be in Atlanta in a gym, you know, a lot of athletes, football, every sport lives in Atlanta. And I'm in there and guys are working now. It's like, I play for this team. Man, I appreciate you, sister. You know, this is real. I was going through something similar. So now I'm like, okay, like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, am I supposed to be in a community, just, you know, educating people, working with different organizations, helping people get help? And I'm sitting there. And I'm still playing. But guess what? I go to Minnesota to go play a game the following season, and I rupture my Achilles. I step up, and next thing you know, I'm yelling, who kicked me? And I'm so upset. And they take me in the back. The whole teammates lift me up and take me in the back, and no one's near me, right? And so I go back to Atlanta, y'all, and it spiraled. I found myself, like, just in a manic state. When I tell you, I wrote a book, man, and I wrote that book by myself because I did it 7 to 8 hours a day. That's the only thing that I did. I was just stay in my house. I didn't really want to be around people. I just became an ultimate loner. I would run people away, damage friendships. This wasn't going to work. I was just like fixated on what I was doing. And I look back now. I wish I would have like talked more to like my best friends because they're really awesome. But again, I just ran. So I found myself, y'all, I've never been in trouble a day in my life. I probably had 2 parking tickets on campus when I was at Tennessee because I didn't want to walk up the big hill all the time. But I never really been in any trouble. And I just remember I needed someone to talk to. I want a friend, and we had gone to the range so many times. My friend's brother's military in the South. You know, he was showing us how to, and I had the gun in the car, and I fired it in the back of the car because I wanted to talk. And I didn't point it at anybody. I just fired it through the back of the car, and that just changed everything for me. You know, what if that bullet would have ricocheted, hit somebody, or whatever? And I had to live with that. I had to live with that. It was all over the news, and you know the news is sensationalized. So I heard every type of story possible. You guys can Google this. I'm not going to get too deep with it, but I remember turning myself in, and I'm there with my attorney or whatever, and the police officers in the station, they're like, this is ridiculous. It's like, you're right here with us. And on the news it said, oh, she's been on a run. No, like, I'm not making it up. I'm sitting there, and you know, the officer's like, you know, everything just be all right. And he's telling me, don't talk to anybody when they take you through. Don't tell anybody anything. Just process. And so I had to do that, and it was like I was there, but I wasn't there. And the only place they could house me in Fulton County Jail was in the away from everybody, because I remember keep asking, when am I getting processed? I would get up, and I'm looking around like this, and I'm looking, it's split. It will be probably this section over here for women, right? And all the rest of this is for men. And we know a lot more men incarcerated. And I hear the men, yo, is that Chamique Holdsclaw? Yo, is it the hooper? And so the women are looking at me and like, are you somebody? And I'm like this, because they told me not to talk to anybody. So I go to the stand where the officers are, and I say, am I going to be processed? And I see they got me on Facebook. They got my Facebook up. So like, they're reading about me. Then I recognize one of the officers, because she is a football player on the women's team there. She came, she said, sweetheart, it's going to be okay. They have to process you differently. They can't put you in general population. So the only place to put me is in the mental health ward. So I go there, and that was an experience. You get out your cell like once a day. So 1 hour a day, excuse me. And so I had to experience that and go through that mentally. It was really, really tough. And so I remember my phone call. I called my mother, and I said, call my friend on 3-way. And I was just like, I don't know. My mom's like, I didn't know what to do. Her hands were tied. She said, you know, they're going to release the bail, whatever, everything's already taken care of. They just have to process me. And then I have been there. Luckily, this lady comes up from downstairs, and she's like, I know your family. I actually grew up in Astoria. And she's like, I'm pushing your paperwork to the front, but I have to tell you that it's a lot of media stuff downstairs, and it's a number on your head. I didn't understand what that meant. I had no idea. She's like, no, if somebody uses like $25,000 if they get a picture of me. I was like, no, I'm thinking back now, like I'm not important. But I guess the situation, you know, sensationalized. I was on a run, so my friend works corrections. He came to pick me up, and he knew that if he gave, I had an orange jacket that I checked in with, if he gave it to the woman that was there, he said, you have a ride to get home, sweetheart? She did not have a ride. So he agreed to give her a ride. So he put the jacket on her and took her in his car. Everybody went to follow them. And I went in my car. And it sounds like some, what's the Kevin Spacey type movie stuff, right? Like, everybody goes. But the part about that was I got out of there easy, but life was not easy after. So I went back home, and life just really fell apart. It's like I couldn't go anywhere. The cameras were outside of my house. I was embarrassed. I had started the cycle down. I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I remember I got a phone call, and I was just crying. I was in tears. I was in my house like all the time. And I got a phone call from another teammate, the bounty hunter or something or whatever. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, people was making up stories. I'm like, I'm here. I have to wait for my case and whatever. So next thing I know, I am sitting there, and they said, Sally Jenkins from the Washington Post called. She's like, Coach Summers worried sick about you. Go to Knoxville. So I get in my car. I go to Knoxville. And I sit there, and I know she's going to tell me about myself. But she sat there, she held my hand, and I just cried like a baby. And she goes, I've always worried about you. And this is why she's battling dementia, but she was still clear. And she said, I've always worried about you. Like, you're like one of my children. But she goes, you gotta take care of yourself, and you have to get help. And she goes, first thing is hanging with people that love you and support you and know your character. That's how you're going to get your life back. And she was right. I did that. I got rid of my phone, like changed my number. I left. I went to New York and started rebuilding relationships with my family and friends. And I started to do something. I started to go to my treatment regularly. Now, when you guys know, when you're searching for a therapist, right? Like, I always say I like it to picking the person you want to be with in your life, right? You go and date a few, date around, it don't work for me, right? But I met this woman, and I just knew from the jump, man, this is not going to work. It's not going to work because I didn't feel like I identified with her. And next thing you know, what happened was she became a lifesaver because this was the first time that I had a psychiatrist and psychologist work so close together. And this is why I was going through my trial. And what happened was I'm sitting there, and she goes, okay, she would sit there and talk to me. I'm on the edge of my seat every day. And she comes back and she says, you have bipolar disorder. And I'm pretty much sure. And I said, no, I don't think so. I said, I have anxiety and other stuff. And she goes, no. And then she started like talking about like symptoms and things. And I was like, whatever. And she goes, do you realize, like, this was months later, do you realize you don't come in here with the rapid speech? You're sitting back, you're conversing, relax. And she goes, you like totally have like changed a whole lot. And I said, like, really? Like, I've changed. And she goes, I just want you to get the color back in your life. And that's when I started moving towards that. And let me tell you, ever since that day, it's things that I align myself with. This is my structure, my system. Mine is to make sure I take my medication. That's not everybody's path. Make sure that I meditate. I have to make sure that I have a relationship with nature. I have to make sure I have a relationship as far as grounding. I always take off my shoes and touch the grass. I also make sure I do a lot of talk therapy. Now, I got a lot of friends who are therapists, and it's great to be able to like talk to them if I'm having a moment where I'm really like overwhelmed, but I have someone that I regularly talk to, and she has kicked me out of therapy a couple of times because she's always there. She's like, you have the skill set, but for me, it's a safety thing, and I know what I need. And now being a mom and having two little ones. Me and my wife got married 5 years ago, and I have a 2-year-old and a 10-month-old, and just wanting to be great for them, wanting to be a better daughter and sister, I had to really be honest with myself. So I know when I'm feeling high. It's like everybody thinks the medication sometimes is a magic pill, and it's not. It's not always. I have to really express myself and make sure that I'm just not living in my head. And it's really changed my life having the two little ones, because it's like I'm putting them first. Like my wife says, like, you were doing really well, but when with the kids, you're doing even better. And so I'm just thankful today. I got to witness some amazing research and with the stem cells, and I just see how this mental health community, it's just been this big shift, And I think a big reason is, and I could be wrong, outside of the science and the technology and improving, I think it's these young people. They're so brave. I don't know, it's like, I know sometimes we're saying stuff like, oh, back in my day, and da-da-da-da, we didn't do, but let me tell you, I have an auditorium, 4,000 people, and the kids get up, raise their hands, and they talk about their journeys, and for that, and I'm very thankful for that, because when I first started speaking about mental health, let me tell you, it was more people outside to get my autograph than to talk about this, because it was a touchy subject. So on that note, I just want to thank you guys for all of you for all that you do. It's so important and it's so impactful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you, Chamiqua, for sharing such an inspiring story. And it now gives me great pleasure to introduce Ken Duckworth, and who's written a book, and your sharing of your powerful story, inspirational story, really is a great segue into Ken and to bringing Ken up the stage. Ken is going to have a conversation with Chamiqua here for a few minutes. And Ken has written a book, You Are Not Alone. And it's so inspirational for you to share your story, and for Ken to come up and chat and in the theme of You Are Not Alone. So I want to invite Ken Duckworth up. Ken is the medical director of NAMI and is here, a great friend of Ann Arbor, a great friend of Michigan. And I'm just going to have the two of you
All
just...
right. I could slide it. I could slide it. All right. All right.
Like this, so you guys can
All right.
chat.
All right. All right.
What a privilege it is. So thank you. That was incredibly beautiful. So as Melvin said, I'm a University of Michigan lover and grad, and it's beautiful that your talk is about your experience, and this is the first time in the Prechter history, it's the first person experience. The book that I just wrote, copyright is NAMI's, all the royalties go to NAMI, is 130 real people who use their names and share what they've learned. For whatever reason, we have forgotten that lived experience is expertise. Your story is so beautiful on so many levels. I'd like to start with just talking about you being a transformational figure in the athletic world, because I saw it happen. I knew of you. I got to meet you very briefly once, and I just thought, she is the pioneer. So I don't know if you want to use a microphone or...
Oh, wow. Is this still working? Yeah, this is still working.
She's good to go. So you were really the first or among the first of this transformation of American sports culture.
Yes.
You.
Well, while I was in college, right, that's when it was like the whole girl power boom. And Coach Summit just was really taking ownership of it. Our team was doing some amazing and dynamic things. And I remember as a kid, I would always see the UK group, the Beatles, and the fanfare. And that's what I liken it to when we would go to arenas. They may have got 2 fans the day before, but when the Lady Vols came, it was sold out. And so that was just the way we moved, and to have that confidence and be okay with being aggressive, being okay with not being a traditional femininity, you know, because, you know, we're sweating and everything. We're getting after it.
Boxing out.
Yeah,
right?
boxing.
Sounds right. Let's go.
Yeah, so it was an exciting time to just see women's sports grow, and look where it's growing, has gone today. It's just some amazing stories.
The mental health experience now, right? There are so many organizations. University of Michigan, one of the leaders, right? So many. The Indianapolis Colts just had a story kicking the stigma. I want to talk about your experience of how this has changed and how your leadership has been part of that, because I think it's a remarkable moment in American mental health conversation.
I think at first, you know, I'm a very shy person, if you guys want to know, and I'm pretty much a woman of a few words, but like I said, this has just like impacted my family and me personally going through it, and not at times feeling like I was the only one, you know, and finally just, you know, speaking up. And then when you look at the sports world now, just initially, everybody was checking boxes. Let's be honest. It was like check a box, because there's so much that goes on to getting a program to a professional team. They have to legal. Everybody has to make sure everybody's okay. And it's not until it hits home, you know? It's like those reporters that like wrote such negative stories about me, they didn't know. But it was a reporter that, a couple of them that came to me and was like, I just want to apologize. My wife was struggling with mental health, or my daughter was. When it hits home, that changes people. So now if the players are in-house saying, hey, you know, like the Kevin Loves or, you know, DeRozan, now they're like, oh, okay, we got to get these programs. And we know in football there's been so many, you know, head injuries or, you know, players really struggling with mental health issues. It was time. It was time to get these programs in there, and not just to check the box, to have it, you know, to be a constant for them. So now I have like a bunch of friends that are psychiatrists within the organizations, you know, from all sports, soccer, football. It's a good day to see that change.
It's beautiful, and you were really a leader right from the get-go. So now I have a different question. I'm going to shift gears. I have a Nerf hoop in my office when I see kids. Is that a bad thing? It's about as far as I went in basketball, right? I mean, you know, completely different ballgame.
For me, it was for me. I think it's fun, but just from my mentality and the way I was raised, you know, and that, like, here it is, this guy's trying to connect with me. Now, we're in New York City in Astoria housing projects. Not too many people look like you. There's a lot of foreigners and black people. So now here's the student, the medical student who's studying from NYU or from Columbia in there. You know, like, you don't belong here, you know, or whatever. And I'm sure that gentleman is very nice, but again, now
you didn't feel safe.
I didn't feel safe. You know, so when I travel around, you know, to different schools and stuff, number one thing is that you start talking to the athletes, especially of color. No one in the psychology department, the therapists, counselors, it don't look like them. Back 10 years ago, that was a big thing.
We still have a lot of work to do.
Now it's changing. Yes.
So you have an international perspective, and I wanted to ask your take. Very few athletes really have an international perspective. How do you see mental health moving in Spain, in Poland, in other parts of the world? Because I feel it's happening in America, and I know you were a linchpin to the whole thing happening.
I would say, like, Spanish culture, I like in here. They talk about, they're very emotional people, so in a good way, very passionate. So I know my friends there that work in sports, they're doing a lot on the ground. When you deal, like, Polish people are a little colder, and they don't really talk about their troubles. And I have a lot of friends just, you know, from Asian communities, and how they always like, it's, you don't understand, Chamique, we don't. My name is Chamiqua, but overseas and nationally, they call me Chamique. So, yes, and so they're like, you just don't understand. Like, we're supposed to be perfectionists, great in education and stuff. We can't talk about those hard times we're going through. Like, my friend really struggles. Like, her dad doesn't want to hear anything. Her mom's no longer with us, and it's just like, I just watch her go rock bottom. I can be a supportive friend, but when you don't have that type of support in your household, it's tough.
There's a lot about you that's so gritty, right? You're an Alateen. You're figuring things out in your teen years, right? You're getting help. You're accepting help. You're battling it, of course. But there's a core to you that just kept going. Can you teach that to other people, like this kind of perseverance that is just like it's a singular quality in your incredible story?
Right. I like to think it's the New Yorker in me, but honestly, it's just I don't know. It's the tough times that I've had. The universe has just aligned me with great mentorship and amazing people in my life. So I know, I hear voices of my grandmother, telling me, you might hit the ground, but you got to bounce back up. I would hear Coach Summit's voice. Tough times don't last, and tough people do. And I just, that athlete in me, it's like I'm going to go through stuff. I may have suffered through embarrassment or have to deal with shame or guilt, but you know what? I'm going to work through it. I'm not a quitter. And I know it gets tough. I know some of the kids is like, you don't understand. I'm like, no, I do. Like, I've been there, but now it's a lot of resources available. Like, it's so many resources, as you know, and there's always someone that's going to be there to listen to you. It's not necessarily always mom and dad or your guardians or whatever. There's teachers and stuff, but I just love how this conversation has just really changed and it's been normalized.
Yeah. Yeah, so shame. I just want to develop that for a minute because you got to a point where you could transcend it. And that's been the thing that I think has changed the most. Science is moving fast, but I feel like the isolation that comes with shame is changing faster than the science is. How could you just develop that a little bit more in your own experience? Because you made a decision.
Right. And you're asking and dealing with the shame and stuff?
How you did it to model for so many other people, which you did.
Right. I read a lot. I read a lot of documentaries, and I read about like great people that sometimes you just have to take the licks for society. And I just told myself, like, I'm not going to be defeated. Like, I work too hard. Like, I got to let go of this ego. I have to. I have to let go of this ego and just know it's okay. During my toughest times, I used to look myself in the mirror and I would say to myself, Chamiqua, it's okay. You're not perfect. I'm carrying like all this weight of being a perfectionist. I'm okay, and allowing myself to fail. Did you see that at Smith? Was it Smith College? I was reading in the New York Times. This was a couple of years ago that they teach a course, and it's won all these awards on failure because people don't struggle with failing. And I found my greatest strength and my greatest self. Like, people always ask me, would I change anything? Would I change anything? And I'm like, honestly, to get where I am today, nope. I was supposed to go through it because it's made me more empathetic. I was always a loving person, but it's made me kinder. And it's made me just build a community with just like amazing people who are selfless.
Would your grandmother be surprised that you're a national treasure and a leader in the mental health conversation in sports for women? I mean, would she be surprised knowing what she knows about you? No. The one thing she would probably get on me about, like, I hear it every day. Like, I'm a very spiritual person, and but my grandmother, I had to go to church so much, and I went to private schools. Uniforms were my life. And I feel like she's like, Chamiqua, you need to get to church. That's what I hear all the time. That's great. So I just want to say what a privilege it was to be able to ask the first set of questions. I know more questions are coming, but I just want to thank you for being the first person to share their lived experience at the Prechter Center. It's a great moment. This is our moment in mental health.
This is awesome.
Lived experience is expertise, and you, of course, are a fabulous expert. So I want to thank you.
Thank you. So we're staying up here, right? Okay, gotcha. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there are 3x5 cards that I think were distributed around, and so if individuals have written on them and have questions for Chamiqua, then we'll have them just be brought up here by our wonderful research associates. Testing. Okay, sorry about that. So there are 3x5 cards that have been distributed around to write down your questions, and so we'll receive them up here, and then Chamiqua and I will go over them. There's one topic that I'm really intrigued about, and we talked about this earlier today about coaching and the concept of coaching and the relationship that you had with your grandmother, and throughout your high school years there's a lot of coaching going on, and so I'd love to hear you just talk about the concept of coaching. We talked about the summit stare and the importance of discipline.
Whoa, coaching. You know, my grandmother, when I went to go live with her, you know, my grandmother had raised her kids, and I looked at it as like her having blind faith to take me and my brother in and to really pour into us, you know, the love and support that she did. And, you know, I always looked at her and you know, like, I'm like, she's just a coach of my life. Then I go to Tennessee and I play for a remarkable woman and see the impact that she has on me to help me grow and whatever. So the hardest thing for me, having been such a high level athlete, is like a lot of my friends coach. And I get let me tell you, if I look at Instagram, if I was big, like, I'm not really big in social media, but whenever I go, it's everyone asking me, why are you not coaching? Like, why are you not working in basketball? And what was interesting, I was somewhere, I can't remember, maybe it was Wyoming or something. But anyway, this guy said to me, he's like, you're not coaching, are you? And I said, no. He's like, you're a coach still, because you're offering mentorship, you're connecting with the youth, and I do a lot, like, in my community, you know, just outside of the mental health field. I go work with the kids with basketball and whatever, and just trying to give back in a selfless way.
Thank you. So there's a couple of questions here about relationships,
okay,
and about the challenges with that. And so one individual talks about the challenges after hospitalization and losing of relationships, and the trauma and the difficulties that fall in the wake of that, and not to mention the stigma and how that affects relationship. And so the question really is, you know, how does one work towards gaining confidence again after the trauma and the difficulties of these things that happen in the context of difficult times that challenge our relationships? How do we
I think, like, when I went through everything and I just, you know, I started getting better, and I went to friends, I wrote letters, and because it reminded me of when my mother went through AA. I remember finding her letters and stuff when she was writing to family members, whatever. So I said, you know, I'm going to use this approach and I'll talk to friends. And some people didn't believe, like, mental health issues and concerns were real. And some people were a little bit more supportive, and some people, relationships I just could not repair. And that's hard. That's a hard thing, but I had to, like, accept it. And I just really had to be, like, consistent with the way that, like, I moved and built, when I say, like, building out relationships now, because it was hard back in the day, because I ran. I did not have to always be there. I was playing overseas, so I lost touch with a lot of family members and stuff, and I just told myself now I'm being intentional about building these things, about having hard conversations. The old Chamiqua never wanted to have hard conversations, and my friends would tell you, if I brought my best friends, they'll be like, oh, I did not know anything about this mental health stuff. And, you know, I've helped them with their kids, and I've helped them grow. So I feel good about that.
Now, you talked about your experiences in New York and the diverse community that you were in, the Black community. There's one question here that asks about you know, stigma in the Black community. Is there anything that?
Yes, it's heavy.
It's heavy, yeah.
It's heavy. I did a conference, you know, Suicide in the Black Church in Memphis, Tennessee, a few years ago, and we really got to, like, dig into that. But you know, again, I had people, and, like, I was pop up in church and I hear people, oh, that's that bipolar girl, like, judging me. You don't, family members, you need to pray more. You know, you need to talk to God. This is why this is happening to you. Like, that was really, really heavy. I would say that's a part of me too, like, that, like, the church I was going to kind of, like, ran me away. And I went there. I probably took, like, a 5-year break, right, of going. And I went one day. My mom was in town, and I went. And the pastor, this is how I knew things were changing, because the pastor was like, you know, depression is real, And he goes, yeah, sometimes it's seasonal. But he goes, I've been depressed. And started like talking about, I said, oh my goodness, times have changed. Like, I was like, oh my, like this is major.
No, actually, no, and that's one of the things that you're mentioning when you're going out and about and interacting with people. People come and they share their stories. And so there's one question here about your relationship with your parents, and it's a difficult relationships. Do you feel that they may have helped you better, and that how did your relationship with your parents evolve?
It evolved to like my grandmother when she passed. Like the week before, it was like Mother's Day, and my mother was like jealous of me and my grandma's relationship, and my mom was like, they're both in D.C., and my grandmother looked at me and she says, I'm about to leave, and she goes, listen, Chamiqua, you get one mother. You and your mother have to work on this relationship, and you just have to be patient with her. And I never saw my grandmother again, and she passed away. And so I really tried to like work on a relationship with my mother. But the thing is, my mother is also a trigger, so I have to set boundaries. Like I talk about a lot with my therapist, is like, I love you. And the sad part is my mom, everything was going so well, but then my mom, we lost my stepdad to Alzheimer's over COVID. So my mom, she's grieving and she's going through, and my stepdad was like a man's man. So my mom is like, she can't do anything for herself. And so she's constantly calling me. And I'm like, okay, like, just slow down, just talk. Do you want to come, like, live by us or whatever? No, I don't want to live by you. But I'm like, Mom, I'm here if it's an emergency, but I have, like, my own family and stuff, having to, like, slow it down with her, because my mother is the type that when she calls, it's all her stuff. Like, ask me how I'm doing. Like, I'm here. But, I learned something also. You have to teach people how to treat you. It's a real thing. Like, it's only sometimes like what you accept. And so long I just like accepted a lot of different stuff, and I was like, I can't function like this. It's not good for my health.
Yeah. Families are complex, and
yes.
There's complex relationships there. And then in terms of other individuals being diagnosed with bipolar in your family, or when that, are there anyone? Is there anyone else?
My brother said he has not been diagnosed with bipolar, but he has struggles with depression. And my therapist tells me that I'm lucky. Like, he says, my dad lives with schizophrenia, so he goes, your mom, he's never met my mother. He said, your mom absolutely has like mental health stuff going on with her, but she's in denial. She's one of those, she's told my wife, I don't know if all that stuff is real, but that's her walk.
Sure.
And so,
But there are many that doubt their own diagnosis often, and many that doubt it in themselves. And so it's a good number of challenges there. And then there's one comment here about individuals that are doing everything according to the plan and according to the recommendations, and they still have challenges and even episodes of depression and bipolar.
Yeah, it's just made me a better communicator too with like my doctors and therapists, because like if I'm taking medication and I guess the body, I'm realizing is a complex thing, and I get older and I'm a woman hormonally, so I've learned to just like communicate. If something's not making me feel well, like I have to take a mood stabilizer. Like if I'm not on my mood stabilizer, I can feel a difference, but sometimes, like, I have to talk to the therapist, but sometimes he lowers my dose on my antidepressants or whatever. So I just learned to communicate it.
Right.
Because before, and I got my dad, I mentioned earlier how he would not take his medication, because I remember him saying to me, sometimes it makes me feel a certain way, and I don't like the way I feel. And I'm thinking, like, 'cause you have to communicate that to your doctor. So when I heard that from him, I just tried to be more aware of doing that.
Well, the management of these situations are really a collaboration, between the individual, the physician, and the treating team, and the individual bearing the burden of the illness. There's one final, actually very fascinating comment and question here about the role of, or your journey through being a successful athlete and having that help you through the difficulties that emerged in the swings of mood and that. could you comment on how your career and trajectory as an accomplished athlete really influenced, or what was the relationship between the mood variabilities and the mood swings that you had?
I honestly, I get asked this question a lot, and I had to think about it over the years. And I think when I was like playing my best basketball, like it's like a high. I was on a high. It's like I'm operating, like it's like an out of body experience. Yeah. I could not remember. It would be like I had a coach say something. My college coach. She said it's Holdsclaw. It's like when she smelled the popcorn, she goes into a different space. And I had to think about it for it, and it was feeding. It's my opinion. I felt like it was feeding that.
Right. Did the game ever sort of just push you into a hypomania and just sort of just feel that charge and the reactivity and just
go.
The feeling would just be
and
fantastic.
Then like anyone knows, like once you have that high, you know, even if you're like a musician and you hit it and like it's like amazing, all these people, everybody comes down from their great moment.
Right.
And I would come down and I would be stuck in it. You know, stuck.
What was a good feeling when you're going up?
Man, it's a great feeling.
Great feeling.
it's a great feeling, but now like having felt it like so many times, because I feel like you feel like that the shyness turns into super social. Like that's what my friends, they always like, now that they know me, they're like, they see me like, have you been taking your medication? And again, I love that that's the conversation that we have now. But I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm good.
Well, and that goes back to, you know, Ken's point about the book, you know, you are not alone. And so there are many people around and that are there to help you with that. And so thank you so very much for sharing your insights, and you're just truly an inspiration to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'll just testing. Okay, I thought maybe it went off. So I'm just going to have you sit here with me for a moment while we're going to be calling up the panel, and I want to also just highlight the fact that we have our Prechter newsletter that was sent out, and there's a lot of very helpful information there, and our website has ever so many information points that we're so very proud of. But everything that we do is because of you. And we have early career researchers and investigators that are taking off on new ideas, testing new boundaries and new frontiers. Over the past decade and a half, 15, 16 years, the Prechter program has developed a core group or a core team focused on our study. And we've been so privileged now to partner with what we refer to as affiliate labs around the university. We have 13 affiliate labs that are working with the Prechter program, and we have many of the research investigators here. And the brilliance of these people has led to many successes. We have now 13 funded ideas, you know, externally funded ideas that are based on the work that these affiliates are doing. Our team has published over 120 scientific peer-reviewed papers over the past decade or so. And we're working with multiple investigators worldwide. We've had requests for our data to be sent to, I think it's in the range of 30 investigators worldwide that are getting our data and working on it. And many of these investigators have been successfully publishing in the past year, looking at things like trauma, you know, and how trauma affects the course of an outcome of bipolar disorder, or how individuals' level of functioning is affecting how their illness manifests itself. So I just invite you all to come to our website and look at what we're doing and rummage around. Tell us how we can do better on the website. We can always improve websites. That's something we can do. But I'm going to call upon now our panel members to come up, and I'm going to. You can take your seats. Thank you. And I took somebody's microphone. Oh, somebody's got.
Come on, sir.
And So I'm just going to attack this. Yeah, this is where. So I just want to welcome the panel members, and I'm just going to ask you starting at the end, just to introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself. So thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Valina Malone. I'm a part of the research. I'm just a participant. I have bipolar disorder.
Hi, my name is Will Heininger. I'm the outreach coordinator for programs at Eisenberg Family Depression Center. I also recently was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which I haven't shared publicly. And good to see Chamiqua again 4 years later.
Yes, yes, we will.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Vest Wilcox, and I am a member of the Prechter team. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been with this team for about 6 years now. And my primary role is one of the senior research specialists. And so some of you may know me from doing some of the clinical interviews and setting up or coordinating some of our research studies. So it's good to see you all here tonight.
And I am Sarah Sperry. I am an assistant professor in the department and a part of the program, Prechter program. My research lab focuses on early identification, prediction of trajectories of bipolar disorder, and trying to use mobile technology to be able to catch people before they're having episodes of mania and depression. And I'm very grateful to be here for my first in-person Prechter lecture since joining the team.
Thank you very much, and Chamiqua, we've heard your story, so thank you very much. And so I just wanted to also remind you that if you have general questions for the panel, to have them on the 3x5 cards, and they'll be brought up here to me. And but I want to just start out just with a general question of. Partially in response, Chamiqua, to your description, I thought it was very, very, very powerful in this sense of enthusiasm, or the just charging a little bit, revving up a little bit, in the game, and this hypomania, that it would almost this energized feeling, in the game that you identified. And it's described as a very unique feeling. And I know that Dr. Sperry has focused a lot of her career on emotions and on how the reactivity of emotions and the response to kind of stimuli and that. So I just want to start it out, if I may, Dr. Sperry, for you to comment on that.
Yeah, well, I think you could probably describe it best, and my job is to try to be able to understand when those things are happening. I use this metaphor a lot when I'm working with my own clients. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I do see patients as well. And I think of it as an overshooting hypothesis. So what I've heard over and over again from research participants, from clients, is that, if something goes a little bit bad, I can get really wrapped in, really shoot towards that. I get really wrapped up in it, and I have a hard time breaking away from it. And then I also have people who say, when I meet my goal, or I am exposed to something that makes me really happy or is really rewarding, I want more and more and more and more of that. And that can be true even outside the context of a manic or depressive episode. And so after years of hearing that, I was like, how can we capture that? Because when people come in and do our research studies and talk about how their mood has been on average over the last month, we're not capturing those dynamics. And so what I, have focused on is how can we use things to, in the moment, if you're feeling that little twinge of elevation, which hopefully we can harness and it not turn into an episode and be a bad thing. We don't want you to not feel joy or reward. But how do we know when it's getting too far, and how do we bring you back to baseline? So, and everybody has their own baseline, and everybody's different. So, how can we use each person's baseline to help for you identify when those things are getting too high or too low? So that's kind of really a big part of my work and what drives me.
Yeah, and would others like to comment on that experience?
Sure, I would. So that just makes me kind of think of the Life Goals program. Previously in the clinic, I think it may still be held at the university, but I was one of the co-facilitators of this group. And within that group, we helped our patients identify different signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder, and we helped them come up with action plans that they could then provide to their family members so that they can recognize these things, or they could provide to their providers. And what we did within the Prechter program is we created an app using this Life Goals format. And so right now, patients are utilizing that. Right now, the study is not recruiting just because our funding is over for that, but we do hope to bring that back to the program and kind of like reformat how it is. But one of the last things that we were working on was creating a provider dashboard, which would then allow the providers to see, you know, their patient signs and symptoms, see how, you know, if there have been fluctuations, and see their progress within the app and their usage. So I think that that's been a very helpful thing. We did satisfaction surveys both for the Life Goals program that happened in person, that was a psychotherapy group, as well as for the app, and we got back a lot of positive reviews.
Thank you. Valena or Will, do you have any perspectives on that? Did you like to share? And the microphone's on.
I was a part of the research program for, I think it's almost a year or two now, almost. I mean, I've mostly been a part of doing like the questionnaires and things and sending research and stuff in, and I haven't had any issues with it. I feel like it hasn't been like hard to be a part of or anything. I've had a lot of experience with Erica. I love her very much. She has definitely been awesome, and like through my journey with like bipolar and trying to like stay stable and try to keep up with the research and everything. I feel like there's been a lot of good work happening here, and I feel like we can keep continuing on upon that.
Thank you very much. I just have a story to share that, again, when Kay Jamison, who everyone knows, and you've probably met her or you've read her book, there was a discussion about, you know, what is hypomania, or what is, you know, this hard feeling, and then somebody in the audience said, well, you know, isn't it just like, you know, having a couple of glasses of wine? And Kay Jamison just calmly said, no, it's not. It's significantly different. You probably would agree with that, Chamiqua, yeah.
It is, and I learned like a couple years ago a whole different aspect of it. I was with a special group, and these women were talking about how their mania increases like sexual activities and behavior. It was something that I had heard about, but I wasn't really aware. And it was a really interesting conversation about how that has like impacted their lives.
Impacted, yeah. Well, I was at a conference about a month ago where someone with lived experience pointed out that that is a neglected element of psychotherapy. The consequences of such actions that occur in the context of a manic or a hypomanic episode, and we talked about shame and guilt and that this person pointed out there can be years of problems, you know, in that, and we fail really to recognize that. Questions are coming in. Thank you very much. And so one here about a really fascinating topic, and that is, how do you have conversations with family about normalizing or the use of medication? And so, you know, how does that conversation start? And I'm still going to hand it over to you, Will, just to sort of to get your perspective on you know, on this, the normalization or just the taking of medicine.
Absolutely. I'll just give an anecdotal example. So my very first experience with bipolar disorder was not my own. It was my father's, and it was when he was manic. I was moving to Chicago after graduating from here, and we went to a Tigers-Cubs game, which was awesome because they'd made like interleague play a regular season thing, so that didn't usually happen, and I was so excited to move to Chicago and be near my dad, and we were in his car after the game, and I saw a medication bottle that was empty, and he had been diagnosed with depression. And I said, Dad, what is this? And he said, oh, that's just my medication. I forgot to get that refilled. And for him, like, that was like 8 red flags at once. Like, he never forgot to get it refilled. He knew that he'd been hospitalized before. And his behavior was what I learned was mania. I called his therapist, who I had been close with, and she said, you need to do whatever you can to get your dad to the hospital as soon as you can. And we did that. But that was my very first experience with bipolar disorder. Obviously recently was diagnosed, and just hearing Chamiqua share and some of these questions, I'm excited to actually talk with my therapist about some past experiences and if that may have been hypomania. So sorry, that was a little bit more the last question, but just a fascinating topic, and that was my first experience with it, Melvin.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, Dr. McKenna.
Other comments?
Yeah, I just, from a clinician's perspective, this is where stigma and mental health comes in, and it's devastating that it exists, because if I sit in front of you and you tell me you have type 1 diabetes and I shame you for having to take insulin, or if you have high blood pressure and you need a statin, like, yeah, we shame you if you don't take it, right? So where, we still are in a place where, unfortunately, taking medication carries stigma. If you see a bottle in somebody's house that, refers to a mood stabilizer and antipsychotic, you're going to be like, oh. Where if you see, I don't know, aspirin or something else, you don't think twice about it. And so when I work with newly diagnosed people and I'm working with their family, I have this exact conversation that I'm having with you. And I say, we would never have somebody with cancer not get chemo. We would never have somebody with diabetes not get their insulin. Now, not all people, are on the same medications for bipolar disorder. Everybody's journey is different, what works for them. But for people who can benefit from medicine, like it's our job as providers, it's our job as people with lived experience, it's our jobs as people who care about bipolar disorder to, normalize it. And we can do so by challenging people gently, by thinking about that you would never ask a family member to stop taking their aspirin. Or think that they're weak for it. So that's just a little tidbit
so
for me.
There are two...
really quickly, I just had one other thing to say about that, because I think it's very important in stigma reduction to focus on education. I think a lot of times people don't really understand what bipolar disorder is, and so engaging some of the family members to help them understand is a very important piece of that. And I think bringing families to support groups, I feel like people have said that that's been very helpful. I do believe that there are some support groups offered through the university, and also I think NAMI has some really good ones that people highly recommend. So that's another thing that's very helpful to
That's an
reduce stigma.
excellent segue into the next couple of comments here, and that is how do we help individuals learn about bipolar disorder? Someone that is and especially those who have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. How do we help our fellow man and women or our humanity learn more about bipolar disorder? And how do we work with our loved ones to have them help them understand what bipolar disorder and help them get it, if you will, and especially someone who has been recently diagnosed. And so there's just a whole day's seminar in these two questions. So I'm going to ask Chamiqua to kind of start the discussion here around this.
Right. When I first found out that was my diagnosis, I was like angry, I was upset, but I was like, all right, let me go to Google. And I saw this story about Catherine Zeta-Jones and how she lived with bipolar disorder or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, like she's getting through this. The story about when I got the book Unquiet Mind, Kay Jameson. So I feel like these kids today, like you can't believe everything you read on the Google, but there's so many stories, there's so many brave people speaking out about it. So that you can find more information. You can see what like symptoms are now. I always tell people though, some people take WebMD a little too far, but yeah, it's so many empowering things. And so to this day, that woman, she saved my life, and I never met her, and because I was just so proud of her journey.
Yeah, and those with lived experience, Valena and Will, there's always the question, how does one teach, one's, family members, friends, about what this is?
When I was diagnosed, it was very much a whirlwind for my family. I was always a very put-together person who compartmentalized and took care of everything I was supposed to do typically. And then when I got older and went away for college, it all kind of started crumbling. And they're like, wait, what's wrong with this person I've known for the last 19 years? And it became a weird thing almost. It was kind of like, what's wrong with you? And then I ended up getting diagnosed, and it was kind of a moment of like, that might make sense. And so I started really trying to take my therapy and my medication seriously. That comes with a lot of up and downs. I remember my first hospitalization. There was this woman there. I don't know her name. I was just recently diagnosed, and I was by myself in this psych ward. And she was like, baby, it's a bipolar world. And, and that just gave me some clarity in that moment. I was telling her how lonely I felt with this diagnosis. I don't know anyone else that feels like me. And she's like, and that just gave me a moment of this is gonna be okay. We'll figure this out. And I remember speaking with my family. They went to one of the U of M bipolar support groups. I brought my mom and my dad with me. And I'm like, you guys need to learn about this if I'm gonna have to be able to function. And I think it was worthwhile. I was always someone that wanted to open that conversation with my family. I was someone that I didn't want to feel ashamed of it, even though I felt like I should have been ashamed of it almost. And so I know this happens with other bipolar people. People tend to feel, oh, I'm cured. I don't actually have that, and then go off their meds, and then you have another episode because you feel like I don't have to be taking all this stuff. And you start going through those cycles a lot, and I started telling my family about that, and we started talking about it. And so I bring out my medication bottles, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I have to take today. And it's a normal conversation. I don't bring it up as if I should be ashamed of it. I talk about it as if this is how I live my life. You may live yours differently, but I feel fulfilled doing what I need to do right now. And I think having those sort of conversations with my family really helped it, because now people talk about their mental health with each other. Right. We're talking about our anxiety with each other. We're opening up about our medications. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of the things that Kay talks about in her book is that, doggone it, every time I have to take that pill, the lithium, it reminds me of the fact that I have bipolar. Is that something that you've struggled with or found?
So obviously being like a new diagnosis for me, but I want to go back to my dad, because when he first got diagnosed after that manic episode and then was stable in the hospital, and I'll never forget, he said it was the most helpful diagnosis of my life because it made things make sense to me that I've been feeling since I was a teenager. And I'm very open. I tell my public story about depression and having depression, and I've wondered for a long time if I had bipolar, just because it fits so many of the things, and I really trust my psychiatrist. I think she's fantastic, and she said, you may not have had it then, it may have developed, but just normalizing is how we do it, continuing to normalize. And there's small ways, like my best friend used the term in text message today, and I corrected him. He used the term, you can't blame it on being bipolar, and I wrote having bipolar, and he, thumbs up, he gets it, and there's that kind of thing. And then I want to share one quick anecdotal story from the last question that also relates to this question. It's about a principal and a basketball coach who are married, and the principal, invited me to speak at their school. It was great. We did an assembly. Their son was a basketball player, wanted to go to therapy, was struggling with his mental health, was begging to go to therapy. His mom wanted him to go to therapy. His dad was all against it for all the stigmatized reasons. And it was the year that Kevin and DeMar came out with their stories. And once these two NBA players shared their stories, the dad was the first one saying, all right, hey, it's time to go to therapy. And that's not how you'd like it to happen, but it's sort of whatever it takes to get to the mental health treatment, I think, is how it works in families. So sometimes it takes saying the same thing different ways or hearing somebody else say it. But ultimately, we all deserve care and to be well.
Yeah. And that's an excellent response, and it segues very nicely into the next question that came out, and that is, you know, when Will pointed out, said that's a bipolar reaction with that. So the question is, so of an individual who says, you know, sometimes the symptoms of bipolar, you know, come up and they emerge in you know, in the workplace, or they can interfere with things and people feel, you know, bad that either the difficulty is concentrating or the distractibility or the various different things that can happen. How does one, you know, what is the strategy to deal with that, and how do we move forward, you know, with this, you know, living with the combination of symptoms and having to do our jobs and having to do things and struggling with the balance of everything. So it's a complicated world there, and
I can try and jump in for that. I think it's higher level because I don't really think that it's on the person with bipolar disorder to figure that out, especially in the workplace. I think it needs to come more from like a higher level. So when we talk about like from an HR perspective, or just policies that needs to be in place so that people do feel comfortable discussing their mental health, and then there be policies or different procedures that are already in place should they go through an episode or should something happen, so that they don't feel so out of place, or so they feel that they don't have someone that they could go to.
Yeah. And Dr. Sperry, this comes up, I think, in your therapeutic relationships.
Yeah, this microphone is not as strong as everybody else.
Take this. Here.
I got it. Okay. So I think there's a difference between, so if your question is like, how do I, you know, deal with having a job and having bipolar disorder and knowing that, you know, an episode could come, and what do I do if that happens? You know, what do I tell my employer if I know I need to go to the hospital? Do I need to take a medical leave? Do I need to tell them there was a family emergency? There's all those types of things that we have to navigate together. But then going back to the initial question about kind of emotional reactivity, and that being something that, you know, I focus on, a lot of people with bipolar disorder do experience kind of emotional instability even when they're not in an episode. They might experience just more reactivity to things. And so I view it as my job when I'm working, you know, in a therapy relationship with somebody to recognize that those are things that we might need to work on, and how we work on them might look a lot of different ways, but everybody can benefit from some emotion regulation strategies, and work is a good place to test those out, because usually at work everything's perfect here, but usually at work, you know, you experience, you come across difficult things or stressful things, or work is heavier. How do I keep my sleep and my social rhythms, you know, stable when I have X, Y, and Z due by the end of the week? So work does bring, or school, or these other things bring on stressors that make individuals have to manage their life a little bit differently. But I think there's certainly things you can work on in therapy that are focused on your interpersonal interactions, your emotion regulation skills, that can be tremendously helpful in the workplace.
Yeah, and picking up on the rhythms, you know, we're entering a season here in Michigan where the rhythm of the day is kind of affecting us. So there's a question here for you, directed to you, Chamique, and then it's Chamiqua. We're entering the winter season. Did you notice any mood, sleep, or speech changes with the seasonal changes, or are you affected, or are people with bipolar affected by the season?
Definitely, and I didn't realize it until I lived in California, and it was really like a change. The sun and everything was energizing me. I didn't get so down, but moving back to the East Coast the last 2 years, I really started to feel it. I started to have to communicate that to my partner and make sure that she's aware, and just try to navigate it. And when I need to like have some space or something to get energized or whatever, she's been talking about maybe me getting a lamp for the change.
A light box, yeah.
And she's been on it recently. Like, I think you're going to have to get it.
I have that discussion all the time now.
Email me though, because there's good ones to get and bad ones to get.
educate me.
Right. Well, we're nearing the end of our evening, and I want to just personally thank everyone for coming here this evening. And a special thanks to Chamiqua for coming all the way to talk with us. I mean, it's just terrific to have you here. And and also just a special thanks to you, Valena and Will, for coming and sharing your stories. And it's very powerful. And people so identify with that, and it's so meaningful to know that others are going through this and surviving and thriving, with it. I also want to thank the team here that has been behind us, helping us put this together. And I got to find the closing comments here. I was going to start reading somebody else's. But in particular, the staff that helped us put this all together, and Rachel, Brittany, Holly, and so many others that have worked on making this possible. Thank you, Ken, for coming and being here this evening with us. And thanks to everyone, the development team. Lisa Fabian is here, who is known to many of you and helped with a number of various different things. And, of course, thank you to Wally, Stephanie, for all that you do and making all of this possible. We would not be here without you, and I just want to have a special thanks to you both for that. And I want to just to also recall or point out, Ken is going to be signing his books at the end here, and so he's on a national book tour with that for NAMI. We're so thrilled to have you here and have your book here available. And encourage everyone to take a look. And we look forward to chatting with you all and mingling after this and just getting together again, once again, anew. So thank you all for coming.
Pictures or something like that. Do you have a card? I'm serious. If I hit you, email you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I didn't pull my card.
Yeah, it's up here. Thank you.
You're phenomenal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great job.
You have a good